Perhaps the most important thing the skin teaches us is that we need to look after our skin, we need to look after ourselves and to look after our bodies. Our skin is affected by our mental state, inflammation in the body in terms of what we eat and how we look after our body. So I think truly respecting the skin comes from truly respecting everything inside as well. I'm Monty Lyman. I'm a medical doctor and a researcher based in Oxford. I'm mainly doing psychiatry, clinical work, but in terms of research, I'm really interested in the relationship between the mind and the body. So whether that's between the immune system and the mind, the skin and the mind, physical pain, or the gut and the mind as well. So the skin is our largest organ, it's our most visible organ, yet it has been overlooked for centuries. Skin was only recognised as an organ in and of itself only 100, 200 years ago. And I think a lot of that is to do with the structure of medical teaching throughout the ages, and that it hasn't been modernised. But I think the more we discover about how incredible the skin is in terms of all of its different functions, from being an incredible barrier, an immune organ, how it regulates our temperature, how we communicate with each other through the skin, either intentionally or unintentionally. I think all of this research is beginning to bring skin into the public eye a bit more. I think it's the most diverse organ in terms of all of its different functions. It's a barrier. It is a temperature regulator. It cuts and creates vitamin D from sunlight, which in itself is a pretty incredible thing. It plays roles in attracting mates and also in communicating with other people. I've always found skin fascinating from a physical point of view. The immune system in the skin is incredibly interesting, and it's actually a great way of studying the immune system in the rest of the body, because the skin is a very accessible laboratory, more accessible than most other organs. But I really found the skin particularly interesting when I studied people who'd been affected by it psychologically and socially, people who had lived with albinism that changed the colour of their skin and how that affected their lives in society, or people with infectious skin diseases and how actually that didn't just affect them physically but affected their relationships and their relationships with society. The skin is alive in many ways. Even the most boring cells of the skin, or what we assume to be boring, the ones that form the barrier right at the surface, keratinocytes, have a remarkable life. They have a 30-day life where they begin to rise up from the bottom of the top layer of the skin, and they begin to link with other cells around them, and then they eventually make the ultimate sacrifice for our bodies as they rise to the surface, in that they excrete the nucleus, essentially the cell's brain, so they die. But in doing that, they form a really hard interlocking surface that is waterproof, impermeable to the outside elements. So even those cells are alive. There are a number of ways in which humans are unique in their approach to skin, and from what we know, humans are the only organisms that purposely change the way their skin looks to communicate with other people, most notably in tattooing, which is something that's thousands and thousands of years old. I think the most complex and one of the most beautiful forms of tattooing is the tattooing from the Maori, the Moko tattoos in New Zealand. And one Maori leader told me that they have different parts of the face represent your birth lineage, how much land you own, your heritage, where in the country you're from. And in the initial relationships between Europeans and Maoris, instead of signing signatures on treaties, the Maori leaders would draw their facial tattoos because that sort of designated who they were. The skin and the mind, although seemingly completely separate organs, are constantly communicating with each other. When we blush, For example, it's a single thought about how we are relationally and socially can change the color of our face immediately. So that's one simple example of that. But also stress can worsen and even cause skin diseases such as eczema and psoriasis. And the skin can affect the mind as well. How our skin looks and how we perceive our skin looks to other people can have huge effects on mental health. Statistics show that roughly 1 in 5 people with acne have considered taking their own lives. And something like acne is often ignored by the general public and the medical profession, but actually these are incredibly important things. It's amazing how much scientific research there is out there that's been going on over the last 10, 20 years that is not accessible to the general public and is only really heard about in scientific meetings or is written about in journals. So I think communicating these discoveries to the general public is incredibly important.